Scotland has roughly 3,000 castles. Most of them are ruins. Most of them are photographs people take from car parks before driving on to the next one. But some of them, and this is the part nobody processes properly, are someone's house. Not a museum with a gift shop and an audio guide. Not a ruin with an information board and a fence around it. A house, where someone this morning made coffee in a kitchen built before the printing press existed. Where someone last night locked a front door that was first locked when Scotland and England were still separate, warring nations. Where someone is raising children inside walls that were raised when medieval kings were still issuing charters from horseback. Scotland has approximately 1,500 surviving castle structures. A small number of those are still privately occupied. An even smaller number were built before 1500. This list covers 10 of them, ranked from remarkable to almost impossible to believe. By entry 1, the idea that a castle needs to be empty to be historic is going to feel like something you were told but never questioned. Entry 10. Castle Stalker, Argyll. West coast of Scotland, 25 miles north of Oban. A 4-storey tower house sitting on a tidal islet in Loch Loch, an inlet off Loch Linnhe. The original fort on this site was built around 1320 by Clan MacDougall, who were then Lords of Lorne. The current tower house dates to the mid-1400s and is one of the best preserved medieval tower houses surviving in Western Scotland. It is a Category A listed building within the Linn of Lorne National Scenic Area. It is privately owned. Someone lives here. According to local tradition, this castle once changed hands because of a drunken bet. A Stuart chief allegedly wagered it to a Campbell during a night of heavy drinking. Whether the story is literally true is debated by historians. But what is documented is that the castle did pass from the Stuarts of Appin to the Campbells, and it took generations and legal proceedings before the Stuarts recovered it in the 20th century. It was then restored, stone by stone, by its private owners. The castle is accessible only by boat. At low tide, the rocky islet emerges fully from the loch. At high tide, the tower appears to float on the water. The silence around it is the silence of water, not land. No road reaches it. No path leads to its door. You get home by crossing the loch. The trade-off is the one you accept when your front door requires a boat. Castle Stalker is visible from the A828 road. It was used as a filming location in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Tourists photograph it every single day from the roadside lay-by. You live inside a postcard, and there is no angle from which your house is not on someone's phone. Entry 9. Ferniehurst Castle, Scottish borders. 1.5 miles south of Jedburgh. Population, approximately 4,000. On a minor road east of the A68, beside the Jed Water. First built around 1470 by the Kerr family. The current structure was rebuilt around 1598 on the same foundations after repeated destruction. The Kerr family, now Marquess of Lothian, still own it. That sentence requires a moment. The family that built this castle in the 1470s still owns it today. Over 550 years of continuous possession. Ferniehurst has been sacked, burned and rebuilt more times than almost any occupied castle in Scotland. The English seized and burned it in 1523, taking the Carr-Laird prisoner. The Scots retook it in 1549, with French military assistance, by digging a hole directly through the castle wall. The surviving English garrison was killed. James VI of Scotland attacked and partially demolished it in 1593, because the Carrs had sheltered the rebellious Earl of Bothwell. Every time this castle was destroyed, the Carrs rebuilt it, on the same ground, in the same place. The castle contains what is known as the left-handed staircase. According to long-held family tradition, after the Battle of Flodden in 1513, Sir Andrew Kerr, who was himself left-handed, trained his followers to fight with their left hands. The spiral staircase at Ferniehurst turns in the opposite direction to standard Scottish castle staircases, designed to give a left-handed swordsman the defensive advantage in close combat. The trade-off is this. Your home's defining characteristic across 5.5 centuries is that it keeps getting destroyed and rebuilt. Survival here was never passive. It was an act of deliberate, repeated, stubborn reconstruction by the same family across 22 generations. Entry 8. Duart Castle, Isle of Mull. On a cliff at the eastern point of the Isle of Mull in the Hebrides, commanding the Sound of Mull, accessible only by ferry from the mainland. Built in the 13th century, seat of Clan MacLean for over 400 years. The walls in places are up to 29 feet thick. The 14th century keep is still structurally intact. But here is where this entry departs from the pattern. Duart was not continuously occupied. In 1691, the MacLeans lost their lands to the Duke of Argyll. The castle was abandoned. For over 200 years it sat empty, roofless, open to the Atlantic wind. By the early 1900s it was a ruin. Then, in 1911, Sir Fitzroy MacLean, 26th Chief of Clan MacLean, purchased the castle back and spent years restoring it stone by stone. The clan chief moved back into a building his family had lost 2 centuries earlier. That raises a question the rest of this list is going to make more pressing. What is continuity? Is it an unbroken chain of occupation? Or is it a family that returns to a building after 200 years and resumes the chain as if it never snapped? Because if Duart is any guide, the building was waiting. The approach to Duart is by sea. The castle appears on the headland as the ferry rounds the point of Mull. Stone the colour of grey weather against green hillside against Atlantic water. The MacLeans chose this position because from this cliff they could control all shipping traffic through the Sound. The strategic logic is still visible. The castle does not sit on the landscape. It commands it. The trade-off is isolation. Your home is on an island, accessible only by ferry. It was a ruin within living memory. The restoration is extraordinary. But you live where the MacLeans chose to live for the same reason they chose it. Because no one can reach you easily. That is the attraction. That is also the cost. And here is where the list shifts. The first 3 entries were about survival, against destruction, against abandonment, against the sea. From this point forward, every entry is about something else entirely. Families that never left. Chains that never broke. Buildings where someone has been home without interruption for 5, 6, 7, 800 years. Entry 7. Cawdor Castle, Highland. Near Nairn, approximately 15 miles east of Inverness. Population of the village of Cawdor, approximately 800. The central tower was built in the late 14th century, around 1370 to 1380. The Cawdor family, the Thanes of Cawdor, have occupied the castle continuously since. It remains their private family home. According to long-standing family legend, the founding of Cawdor involved a dream. The first Thane is said to have dreamed of a donkey carrying a chest of gold. In the dream, the donkey lay down at the perfect site for a new castle. The Thane, so the story goes, loaded a real donkey with a real chest, followed it across the landscape, and when it stopped beneath a holly tree, he built the tower around that tree. The trunk of a holly tree is still visible in the basement vault of the tower today. It has been carbon dated to approximately 1372. Whether the legend of the donkey is historically accurate is another matter entirely. What is verifiable is the tree. It is there. It has been dated. The castle was built around it. Cawdor is globally famous because of Shakespeare. Macbeth is named Thane of Cawdor in the play, but the historical King Macbeth died around 1057. The castle was not built until the 14th century. The literary connection is an anachronism of roughly 300 years. The family has lived with the weight and the tourist traffic of that anachronism ever since. The relationship between the castle and the play is something the family navigates constantly. Shakespeare made Cawdor the most famous castle name in the English language. The association brings visitors. The visitors fund the extraordinary gardens and the maintenance of the medieval structure. But the world comes to Cawdor because of a fictional murder. The family lives inside someone else's story. That story has been running for over 400 years, and it will never end. Entry 6. Culzean Castle, North Ayrshire, near Fairley, on the Firth of Clyde coast. approximately 35 miles southwest of Glasgow. The Boyle family has held Kelburn since the 12th century. The original wooden tower was replaced by a stone Norman keep in the 1200s. Sections of that 13th century keep are still in use today, forming the core of the current building. The 10th Earl of Glasgow, Patrick Boyle, and his family continue to reside in the castle. Kelburn has been continuously inhabited by the same family for longer than any other castle in Scotland. Nearly 900 years. The same bloodline, the same ground. But here is what separates Kelburn from everything else on this list. In 2007, the Earl was told the castle's concrete facing, applied in the 1950s, needed replacing to prevent further damage to the stonework. Instead of scaffolding and traditional restoration, his children suggested something else. 4 Brazilian graffiti artists were invited to Scotland. They painted the turrets and walls of a 13th century castle in vivid, surreal, urban street art. Historic Scotland agreed on the condition that the graffiti would eventually be removed when proper restoration began. It has not been removed. Public support and the surge in visitor interest it generated led to its preservation. In 2011, graffiti expert Tristan Manco ranked the project among the world's top 10 examples of street art. A 900-year-old family line solved a 21st century structural problem with spray paint. The trade-off is that your castle is nearly 900 years old and covered in Brazilian graffiti. You are the longest continuous occupation family in Scotland, and your turrets look like a favela underpass in Sao Paulo. The contrast is the point. The contrast is also what makes people on the internet argue about whether you are a genius or a vandal. You live inside that argument every single day. Entry 5. Dunvegan Castle, Sutherland. Near the town of Golspie, population approximately 1,500, on the east coast of the Scottish Highlands overlooking the North Sea. The most northerly great house in Scotland. The Earldom of Sutherland was created in 1235. A castle has stood on this site since then, first documented as a stronghold in 1401. The original medieval keep still survives, much altered, enclosed within centuries of later extensions. Home to the Earls and Dukes of Sutherland, 189 rooms. The castle has its own railway station. What you need to understand about Dunvegan is the transformation. The 14th century castle would have looked like a military fortress on a hilltop. By 1845, architect Sir Charles Barry, who also worked on the Houses of Parliament in London, had given Dunvegan a complete external redesign. French Renaissance conical towers, formal gardens modelled after Versailles, descending in terraces toward the North Sea. The castle that was built to resist Highland raids now looks like something transported from the Loire Valley. But beneath the French chateau exterior, the medieval bones remain. The 13th century keep is still in there, enclosed within layers of architectural ambition. Walking through Dunvegan is walking through 800 years of one family's changing idea of what a home should be. Dunvegan served as a naval hospital during World War I. It became a boys' boarding school in the mid-20th century. Through all of it, the Sutherland family retained ownership. This building has been a fortress, a palace, a hospital, a school, and a family home in that order, without ever leaving the possession of the family that built it. The trade-off is scale. 189 rooms. The heating bill alone is an institutional expense, not a household one. You do not own Dunvegan the way you own a house. You manage it the way you manage an inheritance that is also an obligation that will outlive you. Entry 4. Blair Castle, Perthshire. In the village of Blair Athol, population approximately 500, 35 miles northwest of Perth. The original tower was built in 1269. According to historical accounts, construction began when the Earl of Athol was away on crusade and returned to discover someone had started building a castle on his land. The dispute over its construction was settled by royal intervention. The castle has been the seat of the Dukes of Athol for over 700 years. Here is the single most remarkable fact about Blair Castle. The Duke of Athol retains the right to maintain a private army. The Atholl Highlanders, approximately 100 strong, are the last remaining legal private army in Europe. Queen Victoria granted this privilege following a visit in 1844. The army still parades. The Duke still commands it. From a castle first built before the Wars of Scottish Independence, Blair Castle was besieged during the Jacobite Rising of 1746. It holds the distinction of being the last castle in the British Isles to undergo a siege. Evidence from that bombardment is still present in the structure. In 1996, the Duke placed Blair Castle into a charitable trust, permanently shielding the estate from inheritance tax. He retained the right to live in the castle and command the Atholl Highlanders. The trust funds maintenance. The family retains the residence. The private army marches on. The legal structure protecting the castle is almost as medieval in its logic as the castle itself. 30 rooms are open to the public. They tell the story of 700 years in a single building. Medieval vaulted ceilings, Jacobite-era weaponry, Georgian drawing rooms, Victorian furnishing. The cross-section of time is vertical. Every floor is a different century. Every corridor is a different era of Scottish history. And someone is living at the top of it all. Entry 3. Glamis Castle, Angus. Near the village of Glamis, population approximately 800, 12 miles north of Dundee. The Lyon family, later Bowes Lyon, has resided at Glamis since 1372, when the property was granted by Robert II of Scotland to Sir John Lyon, Thane of Glamis. Over 650 years of continuous family occupation. Every castle on this list has history. Glamis has mythology. It is widely considered one of the most haunted castles in Scotland. According to long-running legend, the castle contains a secret room, a chamber supposedly bricked up centuries ago, containing a secret so disturbing that each Earl of Strathmore is told its nature only on his 21st birthday. No member of the family has ever confirmed or denied the story publicly. Historians have never verified the existence of the room. The legend persists. What is documented is the story of Janet Douglas, Lady Glamis. In 1537, she was convicted of plotting to poison King James V and of communicating with her exiled Douglas relatives. Historians widely regard the charges as politically motivated. James V despised the Douglas family and used the prosecution to seize Glamis Castle, which he held as a royal residence until his death in 1542. Janet Douglas was burned at the stake on the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle on July 17, 1537. Her son, the 7th Lord Glamis, was imprisoned but released after the king's death, and the family eventually recovered the castle. According to castle tradition, the ghost of Janet Douglas, known as the Grey Lady, is still seen in the chapel. Glamis was the childhood home of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Princess Margaret was born here on 21st August 1930, the first royal birth in Scotland in over 300 years. The castle estate covers more than 14,000 acres. Inside, the small chapel seats just 46 people. According to tour guides at Glamis, one seat is always left empty for the Grey Lady. The painted ceiling in the chapel dates to 1688. The drawing room contains 17th century plasterwork. The castle is open to visitors, but the family still lives here. They have lived here since the year a Scottish king granted them the land. Through execution and seizure and recovery, through world wars and royal births, and centuries of ghost stories that they have never been able to confirm or put to rest. The trade-off is that your home is where a woman was burned on false charges by a king. Your family recovered the building and then lived inside it for 6 more centuries beside her legend. Tourists come looking for the secret room. Film crews come for the atmosphere. You live inside Scotland's most famous haunted castle. And the haunting, whether real or imagined, is a permanent condition of residence. Entry 2. Traquair House, Scottish borders. Near Inhabited, population approximately 3,000. Approximately 30 miles south of Edinburgh. Originally built in 1107, when King Alexander I of Scotland signed a royal charter at the site. Visited by 27 Scottish kings and queens, including Mary Queen of Scots in 1566. The Stuart family has lived here since 1491. The house is currently home to Catherine Maxwell Stuart, 21st Lady of Traquair, and her family. It is a 50-room house, Scotland's oldest inhabited house. Here is the detail that reframes everything about this entry. Traquair's bear gates, the grand wrought iron entrance gates, topped with stone bear statues, were installed in 1738. According to the long-held family tradition, repeated by the Traquair house estate itself, the 5th Earl of Traquair closed the gates in 1745 after Bonnie Prince Charlie passed through, vowing they would not be reopened until a Stuart king sat on the throne again. It should be noted that the Royal Commission on the Ancient and Historical Monuments of Scotland records a different version, stating the gates were sealed in 1796 on the death of the Countess of Traquair. Whichever account is accurate, the result is the same. The gates remain closed. They have been closed for over 225 years at a minimum. The main entrance to Scotland's oldest inhabited house has been sealed shut for longer than the United States has existed as a country. Every person who enters Traquair, including the family who lives there, uses the side entrance. In 1566, Mary, Queen of Scots, visited with her infant son, the future James VI. The cradle she used for her baby is still in the house. The bed she slept in is still in the house. These are not museum exhibits behind velvet ropes. They are objects inside a home where a family is living, right now, this week, this morning. In 1965, Peter Maxwell Stuart, the 20th Laird, revived the Traquair House Brewery using original 18th century brewing equipment, including a copper kettle installed in 1739. The house is not frozen in time. It is commercially active, economically self-sustaining, and functionally modern behind walls that are over 900 years old. The trade-off is that the most famous thing about your house is a set of gates you cannot open. The vow was made for a cause that lost. The Stuart dynasty never returned to the throne. The gates are now a heritage symbol, and you live behind them every day, inside a promise that history broke, but your family never did. Entry 1. Dunvegan Castle, Isle of Skye. On the shore of Loch Dunvegan on the Isle of Skye. Accessible via the Skye Bridge from the mainland or by ferry. Continuously occupied by the chiefs of Clan MacLeod since 1270. The clan traces its ancestry to Leod, son of Olaf the Black, Viking king of the Isle of Man. Over 750 years. The same family, the same castle. The oldest continuously inhabited castle in Scotland, and one of the longest continuous family occupations of any building in the Western world. It is currently the home of the 30th Chief of MacLeod. What places Dunvegan at number 1 is not only the age and not only the continuity, it is what the building contains. Inside Dunvegan Castle is the fairy flag, Ambratach Sih in Gaelic, a fragment of silk now displayed behind glass that has been dated to between the 4th and 7th centuries. Analysis suggests the fabric may have originated in Syria or Rhodes. According to MacLeod clan legend, the flag was given to a clan chief by his fairy wife, and it carries the power to guarantee victory in battle when unfurled. According to clan tradition, the flag has been unfurled twice in battle, once at the Battle of Glendale in 1490 and once at the Battle of the Spoiling of the Dyke in 1578. Both times, the MacLeods won. Whether you consider that magic, coincidence, or morale is entirely up to you, but the flag is real, the silk is real, the dating is real, and it has been kept inside this castle by the same family for centuries. According to widely repeated accounts, during World War II, young MacLeod clan members carried photographs of the fairy flag into combat. The clan chief is said to have offered to bring the flag to the White Cliffs of Dover to repel a potential German invasion. Whether the offer was made in full seriousness or as a gesture of symbolic defiance, the fact that it was made, in the 20th century, about an artifact from the 4th century, by a family that has occupied the same castle since the 13th century, tells you everything about what continuity means when it is not a heritage concept, but a living practice. For centuries, Dunvegan could only be reached by sea through a sea gate. There was no land entrance. The castle was designed so that the only way in was by boat. A land entrance was added later, but the original logic that this castle exists apart from the mainland, reachable only across water, is still architecturally visible. 5 acres of formal gardens were added in the 18th century. The loch stretches out in front of the castle. The Culzean Mountains rise in the distance behind it. The trade-off is the weight of it. Your family has lived here for over 750 years. The flag in your castle is older than the castle itself by nearly 1,000 years. Your ancestor was a Viking king. Every decision you make about the building, about the clan, about the flag, about which rooms to open and which to keep private, carries 3/4 of a millennium of precedent watching over your shoulder. The 30th Chief of MacLeod lives here now. The 31st will live hereafter. The chain that started with a Viking king's son on the Isle of Skye shows no sign of ending. And that, more than the age of the stone or the legend of the flag, is the point. Scotland has roughly 3,000 castles. The overwhelming majority are empty. And the reason most of them are empty is not war, it is not fire, it is not neglect, it is economics. The clan system collapsed after Culloden in 1746. The Highland clearances emptied the estates. Inheritance taxes in the 20th century bankrupted family after family. The castles that survived as homes survived not because Scotland protected them, but because individual families refused to leave. Through bankruptcy, through siege, through 200 years of abandonment, through world wars, through the entire modern period, that made castles functionally obsolete. Dunvegan survived because the MacLeods never left. Traquair survived because the Stuarts kept a vow. Blair survived because a duke turned medieval obligation into modern legal structure. Glamis survived because a family reclaimed a castle that a king had seized after executing one of their own. Kelburn survived because a 900-year-old family hired 4 graffiti artists from Brazil. No single mechanism explains why these 10 castles are still someone's home. But the thread connecting all of them is the same. Someone, in every generation, decided that the building mattered more than convenience, more than money, more than the modern argument that ancient things should become museums, and families should live in new houses. These castles are not remarkable because they are old. A ruin is old. These are remarkable because someone is inside them right now, this morning, making coffee in a kitchen that predates the printing press, locking a door first locked when Scotland was a separate kingdom, living as their families have always lived, inside walls that were never meant to be empty. If you have walked through one of these castles and felt something you could not quite name, the weight of the stone, the depth of the silence, the particular quality of a building that has decided what it is, tell me in the comments. I want to know what the castle taught you. If this showed you something about Scotland that you did not have before, consider subscribing. We cover the history that surface-level content skips, not because it is obscure, but because it requires sitting with it long enough to understand what it actually means.